Ladies and gentlemen, there have been some more updates on the Raiders draft board, and these reports are indicating that the Raiders have a man at number 3 on their QB draft board that a lot of people did not suspect. And the NFL draft is officially only 8 days away. This could end in the Raiders selecting their future quarterback in the second round, or perhaps even trading up late into the first round. We're going to break down all the latest reports and then take a look at some of the Raiders draft needs. What do they need to target for sure
in the draft?
Pitch black dark last night, I accidentally ran into a wall in my apartment. That is why I have this red dot on my nose right now. No, my wife did not slug me. So make sure you like and subscribe if you want to support my recovery. So whether people like it or not, the Raiders committed to Jimmy Garoppolo at least for one season, partially a second season. They could still technically move on, but they really need to fix this defense. This is really the primary issue for the Raiders. It's quite obvious. The offense was fine last year, might be the same with Jimmy Garoppolo, or even if it's slightly worse, still a productive offense last year. So the Raiders maybe need to get an interior defensive tackle, but they addressed a lot of needs overall in free agency. Some people think they're expecting a second-year jump from Matthew Butler out of Tennessee or Neil Farrell Jr. out of LSU, selected in the 2022 draft. That's a possibility. They re-signed Jerry Tillery just in case. And in terms of linebacker, kept Luke Masterson along with Curtis Bolton. Darian Butler is still there. Keep in mind, Darian Butler played at Arizona State, same place as the linebacker coach of the Raiders, Pierce. So there is a connection there. Divine Diablo, perhaps I have faith. No more Denzel Perryman. He is with the Texans right now. And Robert Spillane was signed in free agency to a decent 2-year contract. But maybe, just maybe, the Raiders need a coverage linebacker. That could definitely be something that they target in the draft. And a lot of people are saying cornerback's a possibility. Maybe they need to draft high. Christian Gonzalez, Devin Witherspoon. But in my opinion, I don't think this makes much sense. You got Brandon Faison on a 2-year deal. Nate Hobbs is still a starter for you. Obviously, he had that thumb issue last year, a freaking broken thumb. I'm pretty sure he's going to be better this upcoming year if he's healthy. So in my opinion, you have 2 starters already in Faison and Nate Hobbs. David Long Jr., I think he could be decent along with Duke Shelley. I think they could be good cornerbacks. They both have 1-year contracts along with Tyler Hall. I think you could find 3 decent starters here, and we've seen people select a cornerback high overall and it not work out. Look at Jeff Okudah with the Lions. Traded away for a 5th-round pick to the Atlanta Falcons, and they selected that dude high. So I do want the Raiders to fix their defense, but I don't know if a cornerback is a 1st-round priority, a pick number 7 priority. Maybe safety if the Raiders are not sold on Trayvon Merrick. We haven't heard much buzz about him. We haven't really heard much hype around him. He did struggle at times last year, and he is a Gruden guy. We don't know if this staff is sold on him, but they still have Isaiah Polomal, who they did keep after signing him as an undrafted free agent. Roderick Teamer as well re-signed, and Jaquan Johnson, the former Buffalo Bill, was signed just recently. And Marcus Epps, he was one of the big splashes on defense in free agency, 2-year contract, wearing number 1 apparently, which will be interesting jersey to buy. And if you buy the Marcus Epps jersey and regret it, well, it could just turn into a Mike Epps jersey if you like him. But if I had to rank my priorities on defense, what I think is most important for the Raiders, I'm still saying interior defensive tackle, coverage linebacker at number 2, then I would say cornerback, and then safety. That would be my ranking, but that is because I'm higher on Trayvon Merrick and I'm higher on some of these cornerbacks that we signed, like Duke Shelley and David Long Jr. Now with the Raiders, it seems like the offense is set because we're pretty much bringing back the exact same offensive line as we had last year. But keep in mind, Justin Herron, who we traded for from the New England Patriots, did go on injured reserve last year. Maybe he can be part of the picture. Brandon Parker was recently re-signed and he was on IR, and the Raiders have also brought back Jermaine Illuminor as well. So there is a lot of depth all around this whole entire team for the Raiders in terms of offensive line. Don't necessarily need to reach for a starter, but they did work out a couple key players who could be going high in the draft at offensive tackle. Maybe they want to find more of a long-term solution there since they did move on from Alex Leatherwood last year. And tight end is tricky for the Raiders. They signed OJ Howard and Austin Hooper. These guys are in their later 20s, early 30s, 1-year contract, brought back Jesper Horsted and still have Cole Fotheringham. It's really tricky to see how high the Raiders will prioritize tight end in this draft. It depends if they really want a great pass catcher at tight end. Keep in mind in 2019 when Josh McDaniels had that Patriots offense with Tom Brady, they didn't really have the greatest tight ends. They had Ryan Izzo starting at tight end. So maybe the Raiders want to rely on wide receivers more for any pass production. That's why you go out there and you sign yourself Jacoby Myers $11 million a year. You keep Hunter Renfro, who's basically $10 million a year. And then you got some great depth there with Cam Sims, DJ Turner, Tyler Johnson signed before free agency even started, and DeAndre Carter, who I think could be really interesting. Played with the Chargers last year, balled out, also played a lot of slot. And then Philip Dorsett, even though he's up there in age, he still is fast, still has that lightning speed. Maybe he can be a guy to change some things up on the offensive side of the football, but the Raiders have an army of wide receivers, obviously led by the best wide receiver in the NFL, Devontae Adams. And then, of course, running back here, Amir Abdullah was re-signed. Sincere McCormick was stashed on IR last year. Then you have Britton Brown from UCLA that the Raiders drafted last year. And the veteran Brandon Bolden is still there. Austin Walter did well in preseason last year. Zamir White, the Georgia Bulldog, selected in the 4th round last year, is still there. And Josh Jacobs, who is on the franchise tag, and we don't really know the future of Josh Jacobs. Will he be traded away? Will he pull a Le'Veon Bell? Or will he just play on the franchise tag? Those are the 3 options. We'll find out what happens, right? What happens this upcoming season. And then you got quarterbacks, obviously Chase Garbers, Brian Hoyer on a 2-year contract, $2 million a year, pretty much fully guaranteed. So Brian Hoyer is here to stay as a mentor, and he's rocking number 7. So he's got the true Michael Vick number, Brian Hoyer here. And then, of course, Jimmy Garoppolo on a 2-year contract. Could maybe get out of it, but probably eat $10 million in dead money next year if you do get out of it. So I'm just bringing all this up, bringing up all these positions to say, where do I think the Raiders can go? Where is there a big need? Obviously, offensive tackle could be a need, or guard on the right side. Tight end could clearly be a need, mainly a pass-catching tight end. And then running back could become a need if there is a Josh Jacobs exit. If that does happen, it instantly becomes a need. Quarterback, not necessarily a need in year 1, but down the road, and also in the event that Jimmy Garoppolo gets injured, let's not fool ourselves into thinking that Brian Hoyer is going to lead the Raiders to the playoffs, right? If Jimmy Garoppolo gets injured. Now, could one of these first-round picks, some of these young quarterbacks, lead us to the playoffs if Jimmy Garoppolo goes down, has been injured 3 of the last 5 years? Yes, I do think that's possible. And could Jimmy Garoppolo lead the Raiders to at least a wild card berth? Even though I do like Derek Carr more than Jimmy Garoppolo, I still think Jimmy Garoppolo is a good quarterback. He is a competent quarterback, and he can be enough to lead the Raiders to the playoffs. I do believe so. I don't think he's an upgrade, but I do think he's good enough to still get us to the playoffs. So if I'm going to talk about priorities on the offensive side of the football, I'm going to go offensive line, right side of the offensive line, number 1, whether it be guard, whether it be tackle. Then number 2, I am going to say quarterback. I am going to say quarterback because I think the probability of Jimmy Garoppolo getting injured is obviously high. You'd have to be irrational not to think that. And I also do not think Jimmy Garoppolo is a long-term solution. I don't think many other teams wanted him, and I think that is why the Raiders were able to get him instantly for pretty much a 1-year, 1.5-ish contract. And ultimately, the Raiders are in a tough division. If you don't have a dynamic quarterback, somebody who could also make plays with their legs regularly, you're probably not going to win the AFC West. And I think it makes more sense to actually move on from Carr if you're going to try to get a dynamic dual threat quarterback as your long-term quarterback, than to move on from the guy to get a dude who's just as immobile as Derek Carr. And number 3, I would put tight end high on the priority list for the offensive side of the football. Could be number 2, depending if the coaching staff really believes in Jimmy Garoppolo and believes he can be healthy. If the coaching staff believes that Garoppolo can be healthy for 2 full seasons, then maybe quarterback slips down to number 3 for me. And if Josh Jacobs becomes, more of a problem, he's going to be on the outs, he's not going to be with the Raiders, then I instantly put running back at number 2. I think it becomes that important. But I would prioritize offensive line number 1, because if you don't have Jacobs, maybe you can have an offensive line make up for it. And if you have Jimmy Garoppolo at quarterback, you're going to need to protect the guy. So based on everything that I've said so far in terms of priority, like what should the priorities of the Raiders be? Number 1 is offensive line and defensive tackle. That's what I've ranked number 1 if I'm talking about each side of the football separately. And then as number 2 on the offensive side of the football, I put quarterback, and number 2 here, I put linebacker. So there we go. This is the priority queue here. And then number 3, I added cornerback, and 4 was safety. Even though these are kind of a tie for me, and I actually believe in some of the veterans the Raiders have signed, like Duke Shelley, who played for the Vikings last year. And on the offensive side of the ball, number 3 is running back, maybe number 4 tight end, and then wide receiver becomes last. Not a draft need at all, in my opinion, for the Raiders, especially if they really believe in Hunter Renfro. So my draft projection is basically that the Raiders may take a defensive tackle or offensive tackle with the number 7 overall pick. That is not that sexy. Jalen Carter, I think, would get people hyped up, and I think people would be upset if the Raiders took a tackle and maybe like a Peter Skoronski with the pick number 7. But when you look at the needs of this team, that could be likely, especially if if a quarterback does not fall there that the Raiders like, and there is a quarterback there that the Raiders could end up taking at pick number 7, obviously, but in the event that they don't take a quarterback, maybe they could find somebody in the second round. You have this from Pro Football Network. Apparently, the Raiders draft board is a little different than a lot of people realize in terms of the quarterback, and this is what he has determined based on talking to people around the league. This is Tony Pauline from Pro Football Network saying that a team that could trade up for Hendon Hooker, the quarterback out of Tennessee, who he believes the Raiders have rated as their number 3 quarterback on the board. So no Bryce Young, no CJ Stroud. Apparently the Raiders like Hendon Hooker. And look, if Hendon Hooker was healthy, if he did not tear his ACL last year, who knows if this guy is the number 1 quarterback taken in this 2023 draft. That is totally a possibility. But Raiders presently have Hooker rated as the number 3 quarterback on their board and don't believe the top 2 signal callers like CJ Stroud and Bryce Young will be there falling. And so the Raiders could possibly snatch him in round 1 or round 2. So keep in mind, pick number 7 in first round, pick 38 in round 2. Maybe the Raiders could trade their second round, a pick next year, or a pick in the later rounds, a 5th or a 6th round, to move up from 38 to 31 and get back in the first round, snag Hendon Hooker if he is still there. And the Raiders could end up having 2, first round picks on draft night, guys. It could be a defensive player at pick 7 and then trading up and getting Hendon Hooker in the late first round. I think that would be an ideal situation for the Raiders. If you're going to have Jimmy Garoppolo start this year anyways, have a quarterback who has some injury issues, who has to get healthy real quick, have him sit behind him and get him for a late first round pick. So you also get that 5th year option. If he ends up being a star, you can keep him for an extra year. That's why you want to make sure that quarterback is on that first round rookie contract. Drop your comments and your predictions for the Raiders draft below. Peace out, everybody, and I hope you have a good one.